Well, hello. It is January 3rd. Happy New Year. It is 2024. Welcome back to Scouching Live. If I appear disheveled today, it's because I was crying my eyes out leading into this show for my fallen comrades, our poor Canadians. We'll get to them later, but unfortunate day for them yesterday. Watched that game live. I watched most of the quarterfinal games, and I'll tell you, it was an exciting day, to say the least. It was a hell of a day, and we'll get into it. But, man, shouts out to the Canadian national junior team. They put up a fight, but as this tradition shows, or this tournament can show, it can be a bit of an unpredictable mess. And that's kind of what they got, unfortunately. Anyway, so welcome to Scouching Live. If you don't know who I am Will Scouch. Today we do not have my co-host Sam McGilligan today. We're going to try to get him back now that it's a new year, new him. But we're brought to you by Fanatics. So if you use our affiliate link below or scan the QR code in the stream, it will provide a small kickback to the show on anything you buy. You can also go to Puck Preps and you can get all of your NCAA and CHL draft prospect needs. So WHL draft, OHL draft, QMJHL, who guys who are going to NCAA, you won't find that stuff anywhere else, and it won't be nearly as good as Puck Preps because great group of people that includes myself and my co-host Sam. You can also support the show by going to Practical Hockey Consulting, which is my business for hand-tracked targeted player analysis and recruitment packages, mostly focused on European hockey and college hockey. And of course, you can also go to Scouching.ca and support the show directly with a subscription where you can get exclusive access to data tools as well as unparalleled insights into draft prospects and players making their mark in the NHL with lots of cool visualization tools that you won't find anywhere else. So obviously, this show is going to focus on the World Junior Championship thus far. I put out a blog post on Scouching.ca. Basically just doing a quick text rundown of Germany and Norway before they play their relegation match tomorrow morning. Honestly, if you haven't read it, that's understandable. But honestly, I'm excited for that game, even though it's at 5 a.m. I don't know if I'll be able to get moving quick enough to watch it. I'll try because I really want to see that game. I really hope. I'm going to show my bias here, but I'm kind of hoping that Norway pulls it off. A big game from Marcus Runebeck Stensrud. Forgive me for pronunciation. I can hear Mikhail Holmes screaming at me saying, he doesn't know Norwegian, but I probably screwed up some of the accents in that name. And just to see a guy like Michael Brenseg Newgard come back for the World Juniors next year would be a lot of fun. And they also have some good future talent coming, guys like Mikkel Eriksson playing in Sweden. And there's a couple of other names that are escaping me right now, but I've noticed over the year that are Norwegian that could really help that team, stay in that top division and maybe make a little bit of a name for themselves. But yeah, I also have thought the Germans have played well this year at the tournament, but it's been a heck of a tournament so far. just to recap before we get in, what we're going to do is we're just going to go through each individual team. I will be the useful one this show. Producer AJ has not been watching a lot of the World Juniors, mostly for family reasons and travel reasons and holiday reasons.
It's also been because I've just been playing chess in the background while it's on.
Yeah, I've been away for the last little while, so I haven't been able to keep an eye on AJ nearly as much, and he decided to run away to the United States for a little while and go to a couple of hockey games. And I don't know if you want to recap your holiday, Mr. Jadaro, with your family, but I let you out for a while.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. Got to go to Pittsburgh and see Sid play for the first time in my life, which was awesome, but he didn't score a point, so big sad.
But he sucks now.
Noel Achari, Cookie as they call him in Pittsburgh for whatever reason, got me a free Big Mac because he scored within 3 minutes of the second period, which I didn't know was a thing until I pulled up to a McDonald's and claimed a free Big Mac the next day.
I love those old, in Toronto, we used to have those promotions all the time. You'd get I forget what it was, a free slice of pizza if the Raptor, it is okay.
But
I don't know. I haven't
pizza.
been.
Why would I do that?
If you're like drunk or high, maybe pizza works, but
I'm Italian.
Yeah, no.
I can't eat that.
That's true. Yeah, you're the Italian. That's true. That would be offensive to your entire culture. Anyway, back
Hawaiian pizza, but it still tastes good.
I'm a Hawaiian pizza person. I think that the people who yell about it being sacrilegious are close-minded and ignorant. but
It
that's just
is.
me.
It
Yeah.
is sacrilegious, but it's also. I think this is a Homer quote when he ate the what's that Christian or Catholic bread thing that you're the wafer.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Sacrilegious. That
that's true.
that's how I would describe Hawaiian pizza.
Fair enough. It's a cross-cultural thing, like if you eat Chinese food in Canada, it's definitely not usually actual Chinese food. I mean, you can find that and it's very good too, but in any case, it kind of happens when you have a melting pot, like when I wonder, before we move on to the actual show, I wonder when the first person in Hawaii ever ate a pizza was. I don't know. I feel like it's much later in history than we would think because I, they're so isolated and so far from, like, it's probably on the literally other side of the world from Italy. I don't know, and then the
It's quite
states
far.
didn't even. It's quite far, and they didn't even have the states didn't even have control of Hawaii until the 20th century, I believe, or something like that, or 19th century. So
Yeah.
anyway, I don't know. It's just a thought of who was the last American to eat a pizza for the first time, and it might have been a Hawaiian, which is kind of crazy. And now they have their own variety of pizza
Even
named
though
after
it
them.
wasn't invented there, it was invented in the country that you are representing with your jersey.
Is it? Wait, what?
Yeah, Hawaiian pizza.
Oh, Hawaiian pizza is a Canadian. Okay, right. Oh, well, that also makes sense, I suppose. But my point still stands. The first time a Hawaiian ate a pizza probably was later in history than we thought. We got really off track, but that's okay. We try to have
That's what we always
a little
do.
fun. Yeah, we always do that. And anyway, I mean, I hope Mr. Jadaro, you had a lovely holiday with your family. I was in the woods. So I didn't really do a whole lot of much except played a lot of Ticket to Ride. So for board game people, Ticket to Ride was the one that was most popular. I brought a whole sack full of board games, and that one popped out quite a few times. And I also introduced my former finance worker dad to the game Splendor. So you can also check that one out too if you are a mercantilist kind of thinking kind of person. But in any case, let's get back to the actual show we have planned here today. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through each individual team, but we're going to just recap kind of what happened through the round robins and in the groups themselves. Just overview, and then each team will go through sort of quickly through each game. I will say I didn't see every single game of this tournament. I've gone back and watched bits and pieces of all of them, but I watched a majority of them, a large number of them. I've seen every team play a couple of times, so there's a little bit of a backbone here. But yeah, so it's a lot of hockey to watch, especially when you're stuck in the woods. But anyway, so Group A was sort of the more straightforward one, I guess you could say ish. So Sweden finished obviously in first, 3-1 with a loss in overtime. The Canadians also went 3-1, of course, losing in regulation to the Swedes in that 2-0 loss. The Finns went 2-2. Latvians went 1-3, and the Germans also going 1-3. So, I mean, I think that Group A overall kind of broke down generally how many people expected. I mean, it's kind of unfortunate that Germany had a much better goal differential than Latvia, but ended up in the relegation round anyway. I thought Germany was maybe a little bit of a better team than Latvia, but again, this tournament often comes down to one game for a lot of teams in many different ways. Canada losing to Sweden gave them, I guess, more difficult quarterfinal. I mean, Sweden-Switzerland went to overtime, but Canada-Switzerland probably a more favorable matchup than the Czech Republic. But Latvia beating Germany 6-2 was, a game that when I went back and watched it, it was a bit of a surprise that Germany sort of had a night like that, especially based on how their goaltending had been in the tournament outside of that game. But yeah, I mean, so Latvia getting through to the quarterfinals, obviously they were eliminated by the United States. But generally, I mean, I think in that group, things broke down about as expected, except for, of course, Finland and Germany getting their win against Finland. If you didn't watch any of the broadcast and heard them say it every opportunity they got, it was the first time that Germany has ever beaten Finland at this tournament, which is why I love to see countries like Germany, like Norway. I love to see them in these tournaments. That game Norway played against the U.S. We'll get to Group B in a sec, but it ended 4-1. But I mean, a lot of people in my shoes probably are expecting that game to be 8, 9, 10 nothing. And I mean, Norway hung in there. They got a great goaltending performance. And after the first period, it was a tie game. Like it wasn't too insane. And I mean, I'm a huge fan of this tournament because it does bring some attention and elevate some of the best talent in these sort of B-level nations beyond what they probably normally will get back at home. And I think that that's a really important thing for the development of hockey and for the future and all of that stuff. But you've heard me say that a million times.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but next year we get Kazakhstan, right?
Yes, Kazakhstan's coming in next year.
Greatest country in the world.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one too. I mean, we can quickly, at least I can, because I watched a bit of the 1A tournament. I thought Denmark was going to take that one. I mean, with guys like Oscar Fisker Molgaard on the team, Anton Linda, a couple of other Danes that have looked pretty decent relative to the Kazakhs that I've seen over the course of the year. I definitely I don't know. I thought Denmark was going to run away with it, but I think they finished third. Unfortunately, my boys, Japan, were eliminated. They're always a fun team to watch, but it's fun on one hand, but you got to be good on the other, and they got beat decently. But they're still, I still believe in the Japanese. But yes, next year it is Kazakhstan, and we'll see how they do. I definitely think if I had to put money on a team to win between, say, Norway, Germany, and Kazakhstan in a 3-team tournament, I'm probably thinking Kazakhstan doesn't win that tournament. But you never know. Who knows? They might put something in the water in Astana between now and the next December, and they'll win the whole thing. So who knows? But anyway, yes, it is Kazakhstan next year. Group B, we had the States finishing first with a 3-1 record, with one win in overtime. You had the Slovak team that went 3-1. The Czechia team, Czech Republic, whatever you want to call it, went 2 wins and 2 losses with 1 in overtime to the States, which was a heck of a game there. I saw bits and pieces of that one. That was a pretty nutty pick, or a pretty nutty one to see go to overtime. Then you have the Swiss go 1-3. I mean, they beat the doors off the Norwegian team that I thought maybe had a chance against Switzerland, but I mean, the importance of depth, I think, really took the wind out of Norway's sails a lot in this tournament. But in any case, Norway obviously finishing in last with the worst goal differential in the tournament and scoring just 8 goals in the tournament as well.
Humongous sad.
Yeah, it's a big sad, but you know what? It's not over. It's a 1-game relegation game tomorrow. I'm going to try to get up and watch it because I really want to see who wins that game. I think Norway has a shot at winning that game, especially if their goaltender, Stensrud, really puts up a performance like he did against the States. I think he saved 40 of 44 shots that game and played really, really well. So hopefully he regains that form in that game and goes for it. And then, so again, the quarterfinals, the USA obviously played Latvia and beat the doors off of them. Slovakia, Finland, the other 3 games were nuts. I don't know if how much anyone else saw. Slovakia, Finland, obviously a 4-3 win in overtime for Finland. Just an unbelievable finish to that game as well in the third period, with Philip Mashar with a wicked shot from the faceoff circle to tie it late in the game. And then obviously Finland ending it 50-something seconds into the game or into the overtime period. And I mean, say what you will. I remember watching Jari Lassila as a draft eligible. AJ, I don't know if you were doing the scouting work when people were looking at Jari Lassila a couple years ago.
Seeing him, to be honest.
Yeah, he was always a fun player, and I had a feeling that he would be a good junior player. And he's been playing in Liga for a while and doing pretty well. And here he was. I felt he was one of the best players on Finland in this tournament. I don't know if that translates to him being, say, a draft pick, but certainly made a bit of a name for himself, at least in Liga terms and everything like that. I thought he played really, really well in that overtime winner. Was just excellent. Sweden, Switzerland, again, a game that I wouldn't have thought went to overtime. But the Swedes, it was a tough, tight game all game long again. But Axel Sandin Pellikka in the overtime period, you give them some space. They were on the power play. The refereeing, I mean, if you want, we can talk a little bit about the refereeing in this tournament because I don't really understand a lot of it. But also, that's the whole thing with referees, right? Sometimes things just don't really go the way that you think it's going to go or ways that it makes no sense. And in a small, short tournament like this, it can make a huge difference. And certainly a weird call or series of calls in that Sweden-Switzerland game at the end gave Sweden a man advantage in overtime. And when you're Swiss and you're down 4-3, 4-3 with men on the ice to that Swedish team, that's a tough penalty kill, and they made it a decent amount through it. But man, that Swedish team, they can really pick you apart. And I mean, now the path for them to the gold medal final, at least, is there. But to get through that, or to get to that point, they have to get through the Czechs, who beat Canada in about, I don't know the last time I think that Canada was eliminated from this tournament in as heartbreaking a way. Canada has had their fair share of moments over the years where they have shattered the hearts of other teams, but boy, that was hard. That was a tough loss. You know, I see a lot of people today and yesterday, I guess, more talking about, like, I don't know. It's like some people were getting ahead of the other people who were making fun of those players for losing in the quarterfinal, where I don't really see a whole lot of that happening. If anything, I saw more of it from like TSN and Sportsnet and the Globe and Mail. I saw a writer who shall not be named wrote an article about what this means for Hockey Canada in general. And it's like, oh man, like if you watched that hockey game, if you watched the Canadian team play that hockey game, that was, they should have had 2 or 3 goals in that third period. It was just, they were in the Czech end every single chance they got. There were some individual little plays where they like AJ, you watch the Toronto Maple Leafs, Canada just play. There's something about having them.
It felt like that entirely, man.
Yes,
First period,
there's something
terrible.
Yeah.
The rest of the game really good, and then just one crazy error at the end that cost them. It felt like Toronto Maple Leafs hockey.
It's something about putting a maple leaf on your jersey that curses you.
I mean,
and I
win.
just,
as much as I'm a big Leaf fan, that Canada tends to win stuff.
Yes, that's true. I mean, yeah, and that's the other thing too. Like, people were talking about as if this was like some major catastrophe, but like, I don't know. I mean, the Czechs played really good Metapod hockey. There's always in this tournament, the crazy stuff that happens often comes from Metapod hockey. Just sit back, block shots, have a great goaltending performance, and just Harden. You just go back the other way. Go back the other way and take every chance you get. The Czechs were taking shots from, you know, the blue line. They were taking shots from the face-off circles and just following up and trying to crash the net a little bit. Hope for a lucky bounce, which eventually they got. And I felt like in little isolated circumstances, just like with your Toronto Maple Leafs, there were moments where that second level of thinking kind of harmed them, sort of looking for a shot and faking it and then going for a pass and all of that stuff. It could, if it works, lead to easy goals, but I felt like there were a few times where Canada had chances and kind of looked them off or went in a different direction. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. I thought that they played great generally in that game, and it just did not go their way. The bounces were not going their way. And then they really didn't go their way at the end. So just it was a disaster, but not for the reasons why I think a lot of people are talking about. And I mean, look, it goes without saying, like, if you take this tournament so seriously that you think it's like personally affecting you to the point where you got to go after these guys, I think that's a little bit, you might want to talk to some folks and figure that out. But, you can't really fault them. I mean, was it the best Canada team that ever has gone to the World Juniors? No. Does it mean that Hockey Canada is failing? I don't think so. I think they're sort of falling behind the rate at which other teams or other countries are really improving. And I think that the hyper capitalismization of hockey in Canada has really hamstrung a lot of potential growth and access to the sport for a lot of people.
Also, what is valued? Like, let's be real about the defense. It's not nearly as good as what the U.S. was bringing, because those guys are encouraged to be way more offensive leaning, but also like not as physical and like punishing, right?
Well,
and I think that kind of style is what's holding Canada back.
Yes.
And even on a level where we're going to have the World Cup of Hockey, I believe in 2025.
Yeah, I think so.
My pick is the US without a doubt, because their goaltending's better, their defense is better. The forwards, they both have really good forwards. But I definitely give the edge goaltending wise to the Americans, which was the exact same in this tournament. Like, USA had 2 goalies that were great, and they still have them, right? And Fowler and Trey Augustine. I'd never heard of Rousseau until the beginning of this tournament. I don't know about you, Will.
No, I hadn't. No,
right? Like,
not really.
that's kind of the thing. And then from a defense perspective, like, even if Canada had gotten the full, like, everybody who was eligible to play, let's say every eligible defender for this tournament was able to play, like, how much of a difference would that have made?
Yeah, I know. It could be a huge one, right? Like, I think comparing the U.S. and Canada over the last, I don't know, 15 years maybe ish, like since I'd say like Patrick Kane kind of was I he was one of the first Americans drafted first overall in a long time. I think it was a really long time. I could be wrong. But he, I think, was sort of a sign of like things to come. And you look at what the US and USA Hockey has done and how good the USHL has gotten over the years. It's really incredible to see the growth that team has had. I mean, like you said, there's a focus on creativity and a focus on getting pucks up the ice. You know, I think that the Americans have their issues. You know, I think if you look at their team up and down. Eric Johnson was a 2006 #1 overall. So yes, my mistake. But anyway, but the point more I'm making is that Patrick Kane was kind of a sign of the wave to come for the Americans. But I look at that and sort of go, they have guys where, yeah, you can look at the forwards they have and go, okay, yes, they score points. Yes, they do this. Yes, they do that. But when the puck's coming the other way, it's a bit of a, give or take kind of situation, both at forward and with a lot of their defensemen. This year, they brought a couple of defensemen like Drew Fortescue, who I think has been solid. But also, like, yeah, the States have, given up, not 0 goals, like, but they're still not getting scored on a ton. But that's mostly because they don't focus so much on physical play and playing such intense, it's very stick first and very skill first and very sort of creativity and distribution based. And I don't think I see that sort of cohesion with the Canadians. Even the Swedes, to a certain extent, I don't quite see it. It's just been a really impressive. It's been just a really impressive team, and in this tournament, yes, they haven't been perfect, and they've been sort of pushed to the edge here and there. But boy, they're looking really, really good, and I think that the program there is sort of indicative that, yeah, like, when you look at Canada, I think Canada's got, when you have 60 plus junior teams and then a whole other level of hockey, which is one for every province, where those guys are just the guys that want to go to college because they can't go to college if you play at the top level of junior hockey. And so in that case, a lot of them go to the States anyway to play. And I think college hockey is probably a very, very, very positive way to go for a lot of these young hockey players. You can sort of see the ingredients, and especially when you have 60 head coaches and, we're up almost to like 10% of them this season getting suspended or fired or something for some bad behavior. And, it's just a very, behind the times, I think, a little bit here. And I don't know what the solution looks like, because a lot of these teams fuel local businesses. They fuel sort of towns in Canada that there's just not a whole lot going on, right? Like there's not a ton going on in a lot of these places, unfortunately. So yanking away like the thing that kind of puts them on the map a little bit in Ontario or Quebec or wherever is not ideal. So I don't know what the solution looks like, but boy, it's again, I don't think they played poorly. I don't think it's like a cause for panic. I don't think it's a cause for concern, but I'm just saying it might be a bit of an explanation as to why this tournament has gotten so much more balanced, and why you see once in a while these teams sort of just poke the bear a little bit and manage to pull something out. But That did not happen against the Czech Republic. Canada probably should have won that game. It just, the cookie did not crumble the way that they wanted to, and unfortunately that happens.
And I think the solution really is going to be years of U.S. dominance. Like, there's going to be a point where Canada realizes, okay, well, we're doing something wrong. And they're going to have to rethink the way that they're developing defensemen, the way they're developing goalies. Because, and you had mentioned this to me earlier, Will, that Canada's ability to win these tournaments feels more like a reflection of the passion in the country. Like, just kids, how much they love this sport, how much it is ingrained in our culture, right? And like, that's kind of what's carrying this team to success. Where in America, it's a well-oiled machine. These guys are playing together for years and figuring out where, just knowing who they're playing with and having that familiarity. They're preparing for this tournament basically their entire junior career to get onto this stage and win, right? So
yeah,
I think at some level we're going to see a lot of American dominance throughout the next couple of years. I really wouldn't be surprised if the States ends up winning. Like, if we take a 10-year sample starting now, I would bet you that the States wins about 4 of 10 of those medals, just because of the way the program is going.
Yeah, I mean,
could be more, honestly.
The last 10 years, I don't think has been that far off of that, or at least them doing extremely well. I look at, I think a big thing with the States too is, they play they play them together from an early age, but it's also like USA Hockey is able to funnel resources into a single development stream and really research and study what they want to see out of these guys, right? Like, they take the best of the best in America and go, this is how we think you need to play in order to be great players. Like, and it's singular. It's one thing. And they just sort of go, and generally it seems like they're right. Like, a lot of these NTDP guys are turning out to be exceptional NHL hockey players in their own way, doing whatever it is that they do, right? So I think you're gonna, like, it's just such an interesting thing to see a singularly focused program that goes, okay, Chicago Mission or Chicago Steel, you might not sell more tickets to games if we take this 16, 17-year-old and plop them in Ann Arbor to develop with USA Hockey directly. But too bad. Like, this is about a bigger thing than the Chicago Steel's ticket sales, right? Like, they sort of stepped up and said, yeah, but we're going to challenge these guys from 16. You got 16-year-olds playing NCAA college teams, right? Like, it kind of feeds into the same sort of thing with Europe, where Europeans have the access and the flexibility. There's no flexibility in Canada, but in Europe, they've got the flexibility of, let's say you're 17 years old. It is entirely possible that you can start the season at the under 18 level. You can then play really well. They'll move you to the under 20 level, play really well there, and they give you a chance at the pro level. And you're 17. You play a professional hockey game at 17. Canadians generally do not have that ability unless they're really, 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 really good. Like, top tier player. And then in that case, they can only go to the NHL. So, but by the time most Canadians hit the NHL and play a professional game, or the AHL even, they're 20, 21, 22 years old. And a lot of these Europeans, they've been playing pro hockey for 3 or 4 years maybe before these other Canadians are allowed to even bother. At least Americans get to play college hockey, where some of those guys are 23, 24, 25 years old and really experienced. I don't know. I don't know what the solution looks like. Again, I mean, if I had my way and I were a dictator and everything, I probably would have like a touring Canadian junior team, or a Canadian junior team that plays in the USHL and as the NTDP of Canada. And you just have, you say, okay, but at 18, we're going to have a dispersal and they go to the CHL from there. I don't know, but I just can't. It seems like everywhere else is thinking a little bit creatively and not really thinking with their wallets so much, and going, okay, how can we funnel our resources in the best way to make these teams and these kids as good as we possibly can? That's not necessarily true everywhere, but it's to me making Canada maybe a little bit more of the it's very mushy now, I think, at the top of the world of hockey, and the next 5-10 years could be very, very, very interesting.
The one thing I will say about that is I think in a lot of ways, like there's a massive U sports scene in the United States, right? So I think at some level that actually helps in terms of the money wise, in terms of making that kind of revenue, right? Because like when you think about it, that's where a lot of people support U sports. Like I see
Yes.
sports highlights from the Texas Longhorns on Sportsnet in the morning, or the University of Michigan, right? Like there's all these teams with big fan bases that have even some not such a massive global following, but there is a bit of a global audience for American U sports. So I think from that perspective, the US has a bit of an advantage that way, where the CHL is kind of
Yeah.
backwards as we discussed. But that's just the one thing I would add to that conversation.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting too. Like I think Canadian universities, maybe there's a couple of Canadian universities that spend good money on their hockey programs and they do quite well. But
They're
yeah,
not
there's
good.
something.
They're not
Yeah,
good
they're
though.
not they're not
I
great
had to
teams.
cover those for college, and they're really
Right.
not good teams.
Right. Like Alberta and New Brunswick are they're there, like they're there, they do okay. But anyway, it's this weird like Canadian thing too, where I feel like Canadians don't really get, like they're only really rabid about the school that they go to insofar as like going 5% of the way there, like compared to the US, right? Like students will party in Canada just like they do in the States, but in terms of sports and coming out for sports teams, football is kind of it. But anyway, but it's really, really difficult to change the culture of people. But I think in reality, I think Canada just, again, it's not panic mode, but I think it is something where Canada needs to sort of think and go, okay, like why is the United States team, just pouring it on and have so many high end NHL picks, and Canada kind of seems to have a lot of that. Canada seemed this year, at least from my viewing, seemed to have a lot of just good guys. Guys like Owen Beck did not play poorly. I don't think he played poorly at all. Nate Danielson, I don't think he played poorly at all. But there was no oomph to it. There wasn't a lot. Like some of the guys certainly I thought played extremely, extremely well, but it was just a bit of a lack of that next sort of X factor.
They really didn't have a superstar on that team.
Yeah, and Matthew Savoy was kind of tabled to be that guy, at least to me, but getting sick sucks. Everybody was sick this year. It was brutal. But in any case, it's a, I don't know, it's an interesting dilemma that is worth thinking about, but it's also nothing new, I don't think. It's, Canada is definitely Canada is definitely a powerful hockey nation. But again, like you and I talk all the time, I think a lot of the way that Hockey Canada, or at least I think a lot of the ways hockey in Canada stays so good is because of the cultural passion that a lot of these kids have and how hard they work to make themselves better at this sport, but again, that's also based just on stuff that I've heard from interacting with junior teams in Canada and seeing how the funnel works from AAA, AA up to the junior hockey world and all that stuff. And just the breadth of teams spreads talent insanely thin. And it's just, with Canada, we'll go over them in a minute directly with some individual players that made some notes for me, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens with them, because also in the States, like they're not slowing down. They've got more coming. So does Canada for sure. I think there's a lot of really, really good players coming for Canada for sure. And we'll see what happens, but also there's really good players coming from Sweden. We saw a few of them at the World Junior A Championship and the under 18 last year. We'll see what happens. But anyway, the way this is going to work, we're just going to go team by team quickly, and then we'll get to some questions. So get your questions in now. I also I apologize if my voice is a little hoarse. I was sick for quite a while. I had a cough after being sick bad enough where I've been given medication, and my throat is a little bit mangled up. So my apologies if I lose a bit of gas or sound a little different, because boy, last month has been really something. But anyway, let's go. We'll start with Germany. We'll start with the team that's headed to the relegation round. So I'm not really of the belief that there's a whole lot of reason to point out why things are bad, especially with teams that weren't really expected to like make a huge impact. It's unfortunate too for Germany, because had they done anything against Canada, which they almost did, it was a 6-3 loss, but it was very, very close for a lot of that game, closer than you would want. Had they done anything against Canada, they're deep in a playoff position, which is pretty crazy. But a loss put them in the relegation round, unfortunately. Their power play and penalty kill were fine, I would say. Their penalty kill wasn't great, but it wasn't as bad as other teams. Latvia, I think, allowed they allowed 10 power play or penalty kill goals, shorthanded goals on 21 attempts. That's just not great. But I thought Germany, they had a few guys that I thought were notable. I thought their goaltending generally outside of that game against Latvia were very good. Philip Dietl and Matthias Bittner. I mean, I don't know if they're like NHL draft talent possible, but they definitely played better than I think their save percentages would indicate. I mean, that game against Finland was astounding. So as a recap, they won 4-3 against Finland. Then they lost 5-0 to Sweden, 6-2 to Latvia, and 6-3 to Canada. So they're headed to the relegation game against Norway, of course, but those two goalies I thought deserved a shout out as well. Julian Lutz, Arizona Coyotes prospect, I thought played pretty well as well for the Germans. Again, just a good all around 200-foot physical first guy who I thought sort of drove a lot of the play for the Germans. Roman Kechter, again, a guy who I didn't see a ton of going into the tournament, but he really showed why he might be one of the more highly regarded under 20 players in Germany right now. Really good puck skill, I thought. Kept bodies at bay really well, kept a nice wide base in the offensive zone, circling the offensive zone and making plays happen from the outside, which I thought was kind of neat, and had, he scored a bit and certainly helped keep Germany afloat. And the other guy I wanted to mention was Julius Sump, who was a guy who, again, like none of these, I don't think any of these guys, I mean, Lutz is already drafted, but I'm not sure these guys are really guys I'll put on my list for the draft. But Sumpf was a nice sort of all-around big puck-carrying guy who I thought played pretty well as well during the tournament, and came up with some goals and some big moments for them. So, I don't think the Germans will get relegated from this tournament. I think it's possible. And if it does happen, I mean, it's just a shame, because I think that, it's that game against Latvia that I think really sticks out like a sore thumb for them. And I think they would like to have a do-over of that one. But I mean, Latvia played pretty well in that game. You can't really fault them. But in any case, the Germans I thought played decently well. Again, that win against Finland is on its own an incredible achievement. And I mean, it would be extremely unfortunate if that kind of an effort led to them, being relegated and playing teams like France next year. And I think Hungary's down there. And in any case, not this tournament. So then we also have Latvia, obviously finishing just above them in the standings and now eliminated in the quarterfinal, losing 7-2 to the States. They lost to Sweden 6-0. Then they lost to Canada 10-0. Then they lost to Finland 4-0. And out of nowhere, a 6-2 win against Germany, and then lost 7-2 to the USA. So they showed up for a game that turned out to be extraordinarily important for them. They did have some guys that I thought played well. Don Sluckmelis, Boston Bruins prospect, I thought was their best player, I'd say by a chunk. Sandis Vilmanis was solid. Rogers Bootkarts, playing for Wenatchee, I believe, in the WHL, also I thought played well. On defense, you had Nick Svanenko, who I thought played pretty well. A lot of people, I think draft-focused people, were looking at Daros Ulyanskis on defense a little bit more. I didn't see a ton out of him outside of just some skill moments. And again, he's a great shooter. So there was that he had going for him a little bit. Their goaltending, Dave's Rolovs, I thought, I mean, a lot of lopsided losses, but, that win against Germany was important, and, he was busy. I can't really fault super, super busy goaltenders for not having the best numbers. So, I mean, good for him. Scott Wheeler, before the tournament started, was bringing up Eric Smatejko, who I thought also had some moments where he looked really interesting. I'll have to take a closer look at him with regards to the NHL draft. He kind of reminds me a little bit in the same vein of like an Adam Yeko playing in Edmonton, but as a winger, like big, There's a bit of skill there. There are signs that if he kind of grows into his body and gets a little more comfortable, he'll get better. Really good release on his shot as well. Had a really nice goal in one of the games. I can't remember exactly which one, but just, really showcased him getting to the net and getting some space, letting a shot go. But for them, like Don Zlotmelis was the MVP of the tournament. He was the captain of the team. And really, I thought did a great job sort of keeping that team afloat when they needed to. And I mean, they only scored 2 goals outside of that game against Germany. So it's kind of hard to glean a whole lot from that. But all around, I mean, I thought they had some bright spots on their team. And I mean, look, they're coming back next year. So who knows what's happening next year. So let's go over to, I guess we can cover Canada. What I thought about the Canadian team. I watched every Canada game, obviously, considering I am, Canadian, and my entire family pretty much is Canadian, going back like a billion years. But anyway, I would be remiss not to mention that Macklin Celebrini was spectacular. I thought he had a great tournament. I think that, there are players in the draft this year that you could feasibly have an argument about that might be worth a similar amount of value as Celebrini. But man, I mean, he was the guy that really stood out as the creative, skilled offensive guy. And again, Chicago Steel, Boston University, not a Hockey Canada guy, and went out there and was immediately one of the most exciting players on the ice most of the time he stepped on the ice. I thought he played great, especially for a 17-year-old. He took a leading role for Canada on this team and never ran away or never sort of ran from that role. I thought Matthew Poitras played pretty well as well. I'm still a little bit baffled at just how effective he's been in the NHL based on his playing style, but you kind of see hints of why. Just super, super smart, moved the puck really well. I don't think you're going to get a tremendous defensive player out of him, but he plays smart, and that takes you a long way. There was enough skill to make it work, a good enough shot to make it work. Just the smarts really, really made him stand out. And I thought that was really, really, he was impressive, I thought, for a guy coming from the NHL. He definitely showcased a lot of the reasons why the Boston Bruins are giving him a shot in the NHL. The other name I have down here is Connor Geekie. I thought, especially early in the tournament, Connor Geekie played extremely well. Look, say what you will about the game with the penalty where he got thrown out within 11 seconds against the Germans. That, I think we were talking about this briefly earlier in the show, AJ, of Canada looking for physical play and how that can sometimes burn you.
Yes. And
look, say what you will about that hit. I thought he deserved at least a penalty. I thought that throwing him out of the game was a little bit extreme. I thought it would be maybe a 2-minute for check to the head, at most a major. But boy, that was, it was, look, I personally, you look at the States and you look at how they play defense, and defense implies also, playing without the puck in the offensive zone. In a sense, that is defending. So, I see what Geekie's trying to do there, separate the guy from the puck or whatever. But a lot of the U.S. approach there would have been try to chip that puck past the German guy. Don't level him. Get in there with your stick and chip it past him and beat him with speed. Get around him, right? Whereas the play went towards Canada's end anyway, and Geekie didn't really achieve a whole lot by laying the guy out. So I thought he played well. Look, I for what he is, I thought he played really, really well. Confident puck carrier, got through traffic pretty well. And in any case, I thought it was just really, really impressive how Geekie played early, especially early in the tournament. But again, that penalty against the Germans, I'm not criticizing him for taking it, but again, it's just an explanation as to kind of the things that have gotten Canada in trouble over the years, and a thing that I think teams like the States are kind of going, yeah, that's not really our jam. I was saying this, to people privately, like hits like that, like you don't see a whole lot of other teams really throwing hits like that. So the debate really, it's like when you're debating things like Brad Marchand and Tom Wilson do, or Nick Cousins recently. It's like you're debating about the same players doing stuff like this. It's not like this is some epidemic of the same problem and teams are just continuously doing it and the calls are always inaccurate. It's kind of it follows the same group around generally. So it's hard to really, I just think it's something to think about. And the last name I want to mention is Easton Cowan. I thought Easton Cowan played really well, especially early in the tournament. Again, again, really, really smart. Yes, I'm aware that Macklin Celebrini's dad plays or works for the Golden State Warriors. That still doesn't. The point is that he went to the USHL in college and he turns out like this, and it's pretty amazing. Anyway. Easton Cowan, I thought he played pretty well. That in that quarterfinal, a lot of people are talking about. I can't remember who scored that goal on the breakaway. It was Matthew Wood. A lot of people are talking about Matthew Wood's shot on that, but that play does not happen without Easton Cowan busting his bum and chipping that puck into the through the neutral zone for Matthew Wood. I thought, just a guy who, again, you see the work rate, you see the smarts, you see the offense and the defense. I thought he played pretty well as well. And I mean, on the more up and down group, I'd say, again, like Owen Beck and Nate Danielson, I thought they played really well. They had really good sort of shot differential metrics. They were definitely in that quarterfinal in the check end a lot, but again, they were very good guys, and there just wasn't a whole lot of finish. Denton Matejchuk. I mean, I say this all the time, especially this season, but it's like a lot of these players, you watch them and then you watch them on different stages, and you're like, well, yeah, they're still the same player. Denton Matejchuk had the puck a lot in the offensive zone. He was pushing up in the offensive zone a lot. Canada got burned for it somewhat often. And in his own end, I just felt like Matejchuk is not, his bread and butter is playing with the puck and playing in the offensive zone. Like that's the bread and butter. And there are weaknesses with that. And I think that those were there, but I thought he also went, he's a player of give and take. There's stuff that he does really, really well, but because of that, there are shortcomings elsewhere. It's the same thing with like a guy like Lane Hudson. I thought he played really well this tournament with the States, but you still see why guys like Lane Hudson are not necessarily super trustworthy in the eyes of, say, an NHL head coach, right? Nothing against these guys, but there are issues that sometimes come up with those kinds of players. And that's from me, who loves these kinds of players. The other names I have down, Jordan Dumais and Maverick Lamoureux. I mean, I liked Maverick Lamoureux in this tournament most of the time. He threw some good hits. Like, if you want to play physical, you have to pick your spots well, and I thought he did. I thought he also used his reach really well. I feel like he broke up a lot of defensive entries and just played a really strong sort of defensive style of hockey, which I didn't see a whole lot of him do at the Quebec level when he was draft eligible. I mean, he tried, and it just didn't work a lot, but he seems to be a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more powerful on his feet, and really sort of using his reach a little bit better and using his feet a little bit more effectively to defend and maintain gaps and all of that fun stuff. And I mentioned Jordan Dumais. Look, you see a guy who's on pace to score 100 gajillion points in the QMJHL, comes to this tournament, and I felt like his best moments were when other people were doing a lot of the heavy lifting. He makes a quick cut or it goes to the net or finds a little bit of pocket of room and finds a puck and puts it on net. I felt like that was kind of where Jordan Dumais was at his best. He was playing decently well overall, I thought, but again, it was a lot of confirmation in my mind of a guy like Dumais, where you see him in the queue and then he goes to this really high level tournament and the issues in his game, I think, sort of nullified a lot, but I think he adapted pretty well in terms of finding the space and getting into those areas and getting scoring chances and all that. He just wasn't really rewarded a whole lot for doing that. You got to mention Mathis Rousseau. I mean, a tough last game for him. But I mean, he was there when they mostly needed him. It was, touch and go at moments, and I think that Jakob Stantzel goal on the breakaway, well, not breakaway, but off the left wing there, you might want to have that one back, maybe. But I think in general, I thought he played okay. And Canada, just for a tournament like this, Canada needs solid goaltending, and I think in general, he played solid in net. You can't ask for too much more than that. And he had some really, really good moments. So is he a guy who gets drafted? I don't know. I don't think I would draft a twice undrafted goaltender ever, unless they're playing like pro hockey somewhere. But, you can never say never. It's happened before. So then we'll go over to Sweden. Sweden, who is still in the tournament along with Finland. And a Sweden-Finland final would be so spectacular. I would love to see it. But I don't think it's going to happen.
Finland could upset Sweden on home soil.
Yeah, I mean,
Because that's
sure.
what they do.
Yeah, I mean, Finland shows up. Finland shows up for this tournament. They, but we'll get to them. So for Sweden, so just to recap, they beat Latvia 6-0. They beat Germany 5-0. They beat Canada 2-0. That was a heck of a game. And they lost in the shootout to Finland 5-4. The shootouts in this tournament were so crazy. There were some where it was just like some of the attempts and stuff. You just were like, what is happening here? But in any case, it was just still a lot of fun. I just wish, I wish we had longer overtimes for sure. Especially even, the 10-minute overtimes in the World Juniors this year are a ton of fun to watch in the playoff round. But yeah, I thought then obviously an overtime win, a little bit of a nail biter there for the Swedes on home ice against Switzerland in the quarterfinals. I also want to point this out. Since I'm a jersey geek, as you can tell by the number of jerseys I've worn during this show, maybe I'll do a collection tour one day, perhaps, maybe on TikTok or on other social media channels. An excellent jersey matchup. Sweden was wearing yellow, Switzerland was wearing red, and it was awesome. It was. I just have to say that because I'm a big jersey nerd. Sweden's special teams also just bonkers. They had quite a few power plays. They shot at 42%, or they scored goals on 42% of the power plays. Their penalty kill walked 90%. They weren't shorthanded very often. They've been shorthanded 10 times in the tournament so far, which is pretty remarkable. And they've killed almost all of them off. So Sweden in general, I think, is playing a relatively controlling game overall, outside of maybe the nail biter against Switzerland. But in general, I think signs are bright for this team. I got to say, Jonathan Lekkerimäki, man, he has turned into a heck of a player based on where I remember him from a few years ago. Just way more confident with the puck, way shiftier, using lateral skating and lateral puck play a lot more than he was, and sort of carving around lanes and navigating the ice a lot better with the puck on his stick. And he's still the shooter that he always has been. Otto Stenberg, that's another one where Otto Stenberg is another one where I think people kind of wrote him off after a bit of a quiet year last year. And you look at his NHL E-score or whatever card you want to say for this year, and it's not spectacular looking. But you still saw why Otto Stenberg is such a talented player in this tournament. Just the high pace, high energy, some key points for them this year. Really, really impressive tournament from Stenberg, and he can come back next year. And I think he'll be a key part of the team next year when he comes back. Speaking of next year, when the team comes back, Felix Unger-Sorum, a guy who, similar to a guy like Denton Matejchuk, where I see him and I go, okay, I see what the hype is all about. I see what the interest is, but projecting him is a little bit tricky, just because of the pace of the NHL, the strength and the physical play of the NHL and the speed of it. Felix Unger-Sorum, I think, lacks a lot of that projectability, but boy, I mean, you want to talk about a guy who's smart and moves the puck really well and reads the ice really well and finds ways to make plays and secondary options and, just be creative on the ice. He really showed that, I thought, quite well. And that was something that I noted last year with him as well. But I, from what I've heard from people, there were some teams that had him like well into the first round, and the second round, there were some teams that were just biting their nails, hoping that he would slip to them. And in that sense, Carolina got him, and Carolina tends to get guys where other teams are kind of doing that. So Unger-Sorum, I thought, was a really, really talented showing for him in this tournament. It's not over, obviously. And I was surprised. I was pleasantly surprised to see that. But the same for me, it's kind of still the same feeling with him long term. Philip Bjestead, again, a guy who I thought would play really well in this tournament. I thought he played pretty well so far. Again, big, heavy, skilled guy that has a bit of pace in his game. Noah Ostlund, I thought, also has been playing really well. That was kind of expected. Him with...
I feel really good about liking him a lot.
Yes.
You told me no. Well, not entirely, but it was more tempering, but I thought he was this.
Yeah. I mean, he has been, again, really, really talented puck player. The skill level and the creativity and the fun factor is always there with Oslan for sure. It's always there. And we're certainly seeing that in this tournament. But again, reservations, right? Like there's always stuff you could sort of poke at and sort of hope gets better. And he's a better player than what I remember when he was draft eligible. But I do remember really, really liking him that year, and feeling like, if you're going to swing on a guy, that's a pretty big swing to take, and it's a good one. So he's been playing pretty well as well. Axel Sandy Pelika, who's been having a fantastic season in the SHL this year for a guy his age. Another really, really impressive an impressive tournament from him. Another really impressive international showing. The overtime winner yesterday, I thought, really, again, it was on the power play. It was a 4-on-3, so it technically does not count in my brain. But I mean, just the evasiveness that he showed on the blue line, getting up to the offensive zone, really, really interesting player. So I'm a fan of him. And David Edstrom is another one, and Anton Wahlberg, again, similar to Unger Sorum, but bigger. Moved the puck really well, played really well. So then I think on the other side of things, Liam Ogren, I think, showed why he's maybe been a little bit slow to start the year this year. He missed a ton of time due to injury. Elias Salamonson, I thought, had some decent moments and some not so good moments as well. Matthias Havlid, I thought, showcased a lot of that puck carrying skill. Just, again, some weaknesses elsewhere. I have optimism for Sweden for sure going into the final rounds. We'll go to Finland. Juri Lassila, obviously the OT winner was great, but his primary assist on the 2-1 goal in that game was also really fantastic. I thought he was sort of the skill and fun factor that Finland kind of needed him to be in this tournament, and a reason why I think he's wearing a letter. I thought their big guys, though, kind of carried that team. Kasper Halttunen, doing what he does best. Lenny Haminaho, I thought, had a really good tournament. Yanni Newman, I thought Yanni Newman was my favorite of those guys most of the time. Haminaho certainly had good moments as well. Tommy Manisto, I thought, also played really, really well in this tournament so far with that pace and skill that he's got. I really liked Emil Hemming as well for sort of another big sort of physical first high pace guy. The up and down, I mean, look, everybody's talking about Jesse Pulkkinen. I still think he's a bit of a heart attack on skates. I know the numbers and the cards and all the numbers and stuff look really good with him. I've watched a bunch of games of him going into the tournament. I watched him during this tournament. I don't know. He's an 04 defenseman. It's his last year of eligibility in this tournament. He's going to be 20 next year, or this year, I should say. I don't know. I saw some good stuff out of him and some not so good stuff out of him. Otto Salin was another one where I thought there were some really high end moments with him. Consta Hellenius, I went into the tournament kind of thinking this might be an interesting opportunity for him to change my mind about him a little bit, but I'm still pretty bearish about him. But the Finns, I thought, again, they're a team that just grinds their way through this tournament. You cannot ever count them out. They started with 2 losses, Canada and Germany, brutal. Then beat Latvia, kind of got their legs a little bit, but it was only 4-0 only. And then a shootout win versus Sweden, I think, kind of lit things a little bit. And that overtime winner against Slovakia really shattered the hearts of an entire nation. So they're off to the semifinals against the States, which is probably their biggest test, I think, by a bit of a margin. So we'll quickly go through Group B and then get to some questions. Norway, again, their big guy, Petter Vesterheim and Michael Brensik Nugard. I thought they played really well. I also, if we're going to go a little bit deeper than that, Mats Bakke Olsen and Oscar Kind Bakvig, I thought also were guys that I noted a few times for good stuff. Stensrud in net, I thought had some really interesting moments, but also with small goaltenders, the risk you run all the time is that sometimes teams can figure him out and really sort of pour it on over time. And that kind of just happened. The floodgates kind of opened after that win or that loss to the US. And it just kind of all went downhill. Their penalty kill was 45%, just not great. Stein Solberg, I thought Solberg played okay. I see a lot of people talking really glowingly about him. And I know player cards are out there that are positive. He showed a lot of physical play. I thought he played really well in that sense. I still worry about the footwork. I still worry about the offensive potential long-term. But he is a guy who I do want to take a look at and track now after seeing him in this tournament. And I haven't been a huge fan of him, but you definitely see signs of why that is. Slovakia, Filip Mishar, Servac Petrovsky, and Adam Shakora, 3 guys I thought played extremely well for Slovakia through it all. I was hoping for a little bit more out of Alex Chiernik. He was fine, I would say. He was good. but not great. Same thing with Martin Mishak. Dalibor Dvorsky was Dalibor Dvorsky. Same strengths, same weaknesses. He had a really nice primary assist and a goal against Norway. I was hoping for a little bit more out of František Dej, a guy who I've been watching over the last year and a half or so, who I've liked, just big physical guy. Obviously a 10-2 loss to the US is a tough pill to swallow. That's rough. But the loss to Finland is just a heartbreaker. And I mean, I don't know. It sucks. This was a team that I think could have really done extremely well. But again, it's those pesky Finns. They show up, they play selfless hockey, they grind it out. And those big Finn guys just kind of grinded it out. I think with Slovakia also, their defensive depth kind of burned them a little bit. I'm not the biggest Maxim Sturbach fan, and he got burned a few times. He got burned on that Jiri Lassila OT winner. And I just felt like their defensive depth was kind of a shortcoming. And if their goaltending wasn't holding them together, it was a little bit dicey. Switzerland, I mean, I don't have much to say about Switzerland. Jaromir Rieber was a guy who I was hoping to see more of. I still saw the same issues with him that I've seen, but he did have a couple of nice points here and there. The setup in a quarterfinal goal. I thought Ustinkov was okay, had some tough moments. Leon Mugli, same thing. But Rodwin Dionisio was the Denton Matejcik of the Swiss team. It was a ton of fun to watch. Gregory Weber was a guy who I also really liked. And in any case, it was also kind of funny. I noted that in the overtime loss to Sweden where they got eliminated, both goals came from injury replacement players. Jan Hornecker and Nick Meal were not on the team at the beginning of the tournament, which is kind of funny to me. But yeah, tough loss for Switzerland. They almost just blew the house apart in this tournament against the Swedes. But the technically better team came out on top, and that's unfortunate. For the Czechs, they had a lot of guys who I actually really liked. Dominic Rimon, Andre Becker, Jakub Stancel, Yuri Kulich.
Yuri Kulich. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, Yuri Kulich was very good. Again,
awesome, man.
More devastating on the power play than he is at even strength, but still an extremely talented player. Really showed why he's in the AHL already for sure and getting taste of the NHL. Tomas Galvis was an injury replacement. I thought he had some shaky moments here and there, but generally I thought he played great. Just a really, really impressive player who's, just outside my first round, on the edge of my first round. Impressive player. I thought he had a good tournament, especially for a 17-year-old. That was sort of a last minute addition to the team. I wanted to shout out Matej Pershik, who was wearing number 4 for the Czech Republic. I mean, again, I don't see like a tremendous player there, but a guy who I had never heard of, I thought came in and played really, really well. One of those guys where every time the puck sort of came near him as a defenseman, he was kind of doing the right things to turn the play around and stymied a lot of Canada's offensive rushes and a lot of play for Canada. So he deserves, I think, a word. Adam Barish is another one who I've liked over the years. I thought he played really well. Michael Hrabal, I mean, it's the same thing, right? Sometimes he's spectacular. He shows why he was one of the best goalies in the world as a draft eligible last year. And sometimes he's not. And it just, he showed up against Canada, kept them in the game quite a lot. And he's had a really good tournament to this point, especially after that first game against Slovakia. So they're off to the semifinals against Sweden. I think they're the underdog, but they were also the underdog against Canada. And similar to the Finns, you can't count out Czechs to grind one out. So we'll close with the U.S., Philly, featuring all of your boys, Mr. Jadaro.
Yes.
Who guess the name? I mean, I think you've looked at the notes already, but guess name number 1 on the list here
Brindley.
for it would be Gavin Brindley. Great player. Good for the brand when he does really well.
He's awesome.
He had a ton of even strength goals, attacks the middle of the ice. Really, really just a great tournament from him. And it's his last one. So hopefully he can go home with some hardware. I mean, he will have the chance, but I think, getting a gold medal for him would be a nice cherry on top of his junior hockey career.
And he leads the entire tournament in goals with 6,
yeah.
Which is
and
awesome.
only one of them doesn't count, which is great. It's awesome.
I also than Alex Ovechkin.
Exactly. Yep. Confirmed.
Obviously kidding, but
Isaac Howard was another one I want to mention. I thought Isaac Howard also, for a guy who a lot of people were writing off last year, I kind of didn't really see a reason to write him off last year based on his play with Minnesota, but a new sort of start with Michigan State really has reinvigorated him. And I think that this season, his World Junior Tournament has just been classic Isaac Howard from what I remember. Really, really talented player. Got a bit of swagger to him, which I love. Frank Nazar, it is great.
Great for the
yep.
game.
Yep. Frank Nazar. I still can't remember if that's the right way to pronounce his name. It's like a Mandela effect thing for me. But Frank Nazar is a guy who I also thought had a great tournament for a guy who, if you look at his player cards and whatever you see on the internet, he may not look as good as some of the other guys, but that guy's just such a well-rounded and smart guy, great puck distributor, a really, really impressive player that I've really liked. Lane Hudson, I thought, also played really well. There obviously are holes in his game, but you're going to get those with a guy like Lane Hudson. But the offensive tools are just astounding. The creativity and pace, I think, is a little bit more interesting to me than a guy like Denton Matejchuk, but they're similar in a lot of ways. Seamus Casey, on that note, I thought he played also a really, really good tournament. Him and Hudson were just a phenomenal pair of defensemen to have on your team at this level. The 2-0 goal I noted against Latvia, obviously it's against Latvia, so asterisk, but his primary assist on that was just a beautiful seam pass. The timing was wonderful. And I thought he deserved a shout out for some of his play. Ryan Leonard, Ryan Leonard and Zeev Buyam are two others that I wanted to mention. I mean, I think the word's out on Zeev Buyam. He's really high on my board. He was going into the tournament. And he'll be high on my first board coming later this month. And then the two other ones, Gabe Perreault and Trey Augustine. I thought the Will Smith and Gabe Perreault connection, both in both directions, were on display constantly. They were remarkable against Latvia. There's a lot of debate going on about Will Smith and Gabe Perreault, even in the comments of this video. Frankly, I don't really care. Like, it's the World Juniors. Like, it's a crazy tournament. There's not a whole lot you can really glean, especially like when it comes down to talking about who was a better draft pick in the NHL draft 6 months ago. It just makes no sense to me. And it's just, people arguing on the internet. But he played really well as well. Trey Augustine as well. I thought he played really well in net for them. Jacob Fowler, I thought, also stepped up decently well, even though he didn't have the sort of save percentage. And then, I will bring up Will Smith because he did show why there is a bit of weakness in his game. But I mean, the strengths are really, really incredible with him. Rucker McGroarty, Cutter Gauthier, I think they were a bit up and down. I thought McGroarty showcased that offensive touch he's got, but the all-around game, I think, is still a bit of a mixed bag, but you're getting what you get out of him. Oliver Moore worked his way up the lineup. We both love him a lot. Yes. Another guy who played really, really well, and they're off to the semifinals against Finland after some all but one of their games really were a bit of a blowout. That 4-1 game against Norway should have maybe been a bit of a more lopsided one, and I mean, probably feels good to score 21 goals against both Switzerland and Slovakia in this tournament, who can sometimes cause thorns for other teams. So that's kind of where we're at. So if you kind of missed it, the semifinals are going to be Sweden and Czechia, and then the US and Finland. Again, any partner level subscriber of the site has access to a spreadsheet of all the rosters, of all of their club stats, a table of the results of the teams, and a table of the playoffs as well. So you can sort of follow along there, and all the jersey numbers are all in one spot. So you can just sort of follow along there as the semifinals go tomorrow and the day after. So let's get to some questions. I'll start from the top, but before we get to that, I do want to do a quick read of our advertisements again. So we're brought to you by Fanatics. You can use our affiliate link below. Scan the QR code also in the stream window as well. It'll provide a small kickback to the show and support us in our work. You can also get a subscription to Puck Preps, where I write, as well as my co-host Sam McGilligan, and we cover the 2006 class over there. But there's lots of people tracking and doing stuff for the 07s and 08s and 09s for Quebec and the Western Hockey League and the Canadian or the Ontario Hockey League. So all of those drafts and those prospects, you can get input and insight from there. As well, Fractal Hockey Consulting sponsors the show, my business for hand-tracked player analysis and recruitment packages, mostly focused on college recruitment and recruitment for European teams, and just creating efficiencies there for teams over there. So if you want, you can go to that website at fractalhockey.com and submit, and we'll get in touch with you and see what we can do for you. Or Scouching.ca, of course, is my own website here, where you have exclusive access to innovative player tools for drafted and undrafted prospects around the world, all in one spot, and just a lot of really interesting stuff that you won't find anywhere else. So feel free to check that out. So let's go on to the questions, and we'll get questions after. I'll just read through the names that I tracked this year or this it feels like a year, I guess technically a year, but the last 2 or 3 weeks since I've been off. So started with John Whipple, who moved down my list a little bit. Charlie Ellick moved up my list a little bit. Tanner Howe moved up my list quite a bit, if I remember. Ivan Demidov, I put him back up near the top of the board after watching him in the MHL. Gotta have hope. Raul Boyard, I did another game of him. I think I pulled him off my list, if I remember correctly. Teddy Stiga, a spectacular game from Teddy Stiga, moved him up my list. Just saw a bunch of stuff out of him that I'm hoping I see more of when I watch him later in the year. Kamil Bednarik, another really good performance from him. He's one of my more favorite players on the NTDP this year so far. Macklin Celebrini, I did a game of him. Obviously, his rank didn't change. The game was really quiet from him. I remember it wasn't great. But you still saw Macklin Celebrini playing his style of hockey, and it's a lot of fun. I don't think he's going to move from number one on my list right now. Did a game of Will Skahan, moved him up my board a little bit. Again, sort of seeing some stuff with him that I've liked. Zachy Crooks, Swedish player, who I think stayed off my list. I don't have him on my list, but he stayed off. I was kind of double checking on that. Leon Mugli, I did the first game of his that I wanted to do. I did not rank him after watching that game. I thought he was okay. Charlie Pardue, I pulled him off my watch list after watching another game of him. Just a guy where I think there's potential there, but in the context of the draft, I just kind of want to see more of him, maybe more of him in college before I really make a decision. Tarek Parasak, still not on my list. I don't think I'll have Parasak ranked. So if you're a Parasak fan, I'm sorry, but I've seen him a bunch of times and I don't see it. And he's starting to slow down in scoring, and that doesn't particularly surprise me, but maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong before. Adam Kleber, I moved him up the board. I liked what I saw out of Adam Kleber. Christian Humphreys stayed off my list, or I moved him down. Alphonse Frey, I think I had him a little high, but he's still in my first round. Luke Misa, I definitely think I had high, so I moved him down a little bit. Anton Salayev, I did a game of, moved him up. Ryder Ritchie, I did a game of and moved him up a little bit, but not a tremendous amount. I think he's still in my sort of early second range, mid-second. And I did a game of Carson Wetch, and I think I moved him down my board a little bit because him and Ryder Ritchie were kind of right next to each other. And I think I saw a little bit more out of Ritchie that I thought was more interesting, but Wetch is not a slouch at all. So, questions. Let me just have a sip of water while I think about this first one, because it's, do you plan on putting out a mid-season ranking? So,
you better.
Yeah, I'm not going to be Sam McGilligan here. I'm not going to be Sam McGilligan. I'm not going to put my ranking out on June 20th. I'm going to do so. I will. My project for this month is to have one done by the end of the month. So I'll be doing a lot of NHL draft work to obviously just go through the list that I've got and make sure that the right guys are at least on the list that I want on the list, and the right guys that aren't on the list aren't on the list. And I know exactly why those two things are true. Obviously, the final order can change quite a bit before the final parts of the season, but yes, there will be a list at some point this month. Okay, Brian Stewart with Brian Stewart with the Adam Yurchek sad face. Yeah, Adam Yurchek, if you don't know, injured his knee in this tournament, missed the rest of the tournament, and he's missing the rest of the season. So he's had a tough season in the Czech Pro League this year, a little bit outmatched, I would say, at that level. That's not a bad hockey league, though. And I still think you see plenty of signs of why he's a good pick. I mean, look, if he falls to like the second round now, I'm more than okay with that. I think he's been a great player at what he does, and I think there's a lot of potential, but it sucks to see him lose the rest of his year. Also, and Brian Stewart, what do I think of the Norwegian defenseman that EP lauded as much as they do? Do you like him as much? So that's Stian Solberg. I don't really know if I trust defensemen that aren't excellent skaters. He's a good physical player along the boards. I thought he was a smart puck mover. That's what I noted about him last year in Norway. He's brought a physical edge this year that I don't think I saw a ton of last year playing pro in Norway. I mean, I'll say this. I liked enough out of him where I just talked about my ranking where I wanted to make sure the guys I don't have on it stay off it, and I know why. Solberg is one of those guys. He's not on my list right now. I've watched, I think, 2 games of him in Norway this year. I watched him a bit last year. And I just see shortcomings that, the Norwegian league is not a good hockey league, really. It's not great. Not the greatest level of play. So it's hard to sort of gauge, but he has been tricky. And I feel like the smarts and the physical play are kind of where he's going to need to rely on his game for, at least for now. And I think there's a bit of a ways to go to really put him as a top prospect, right? Like is he a first round pick to me? No, I don't really see that. Could he be a second, third round guy, maybe, that can be a physical edge guy in the NHL? Maybe I could see that, but I'll take a look at him before the end of the month for sure, and have more to say. But he did, it's a low bar, but I thought he was the best Norwegian defenseman on that team. But he even still, I think, showed why Norway was giving up, so many goals. I think that there were just situations where, yes, he can only do so much, but there were just situations where I feel like he was, the footwork kind of was an issue for him. We got Jordan Millette in the chat. Hello, Jordan. Go Sens go. Yeah, we can talk about the Sens at some point if AJ, if you just want to talk about them, because I know you love to say Go Sens go, and then
they're still bad.
There you go. There's the analysis. But Go Sens go. Seeing some talk about Celebrini's upside and where he would rank amongst the 2023 draft prospects. Where would you rank him next to Michkov, Fantilli, Carlson, and Benson? I would probably put him at the I like Michkov more. I like Fantilli more. I like Carlson more, I think, but it's close. So he'd probably be 5 for me on last year's board, behind Bedard, Fantilli, Michkov, Carlson, which I think was my top 4. And I think I had Oliver Moore at 5, I think. And I definitely think I like Celebrini more than Oliver Moore. But Benson, I think, wouldn't be far behind that either. Do the Canucks have any keepers on the 3 they have on the Swedish team? Yeah, so the Canucks had 3 Swedes on the team. Elias Pettersson, the other Elias Pettersson. They also had Jonathan Lekaramaki and Tom Wielander. I thought Wielander and Lekaramaki were great. Elias Pettersson, he's a lot bigger than I remember him, that's for sure. He's a big, mobile, skatey boy. And you know what? I think that's kind of a sweet spot right now for defensemen. A guy Buffalo drafted, Nikita Novikov, who was a big skatey defenseman who didn't score a ton of points at the junior level in Russia, has turned out to have a pretty decent AHL year so far. And a lot of that, who I've watched a bit of him just because I wanted to see, comes from that mobility and that length and that reach and enough skill to sort of make those first passes. And I think Elias Pettersson showcased a lot of that. Is he an NHL player? I think he could be, but I'm not as confident as especially Lekaramaki. I think Lekaramaki has had a great tournament so far. And Willander, I thought, has played quite well as well. But he's a guy where you give him some time, and I think he'll grow into it.
Yeah, it seems like finally in Vancouver, things aren't on fire, which is a good thing for them. It's not that it's nice to see because, I only cheer for one Canadian team, and that's the Toronto Maple Leafs. But I guess it's cool to see Vancouver sort of turning it around. Though I'm not going to lie, it would also be very funny if all of a sudden the wheels fell off again and they were put back in pandemonium mode. But hey, that's just me.
Yeah, they are still one of the highest PDO teams I think I've ever seen. What they've been able to sustain has been remarkable. So we'll see if that's doable for the next 40 games, because I think they're on an island by themselves. If you look at the NHL performance dashboard that I built, they are very much in the very lucky category of scoring goals that they probably shouldn't be scoring and not letting in goals that probably should go in. Is that sustainable? We'll see.
Maybe the goaltending part, because Thatcher Demko
Thatcher
is really
Demko.
Good.
Yep. He's been having a phenomenal year. Okay, we got a question from a Devils fan, so I better choose my words carefully because it's about Lenny Haminaho. He's, look, I know he's scoring a lot of goals in Finland, and he's definitely better than what I remember him last year as. There's a bit more pace in his game, but he's a lot more physical and more confident with the puck, I think. And at this level, his ability to get through layers of defenses and attack the middle of the ice and get shot attempts and the puck distribution that he had, which I really didn't see much of last year either, I thought were really good. I thought he's been, like I mentioned, he's one of the best players on the Finnish team so far in this tournament. I thought, do I believe that he's a super high-end NHL player at the end of the day? Still, I don't think so, but he's got good tools. He's got a good brain. as a famous U.S. president once said, he has a very good brain. And I think that the physicality will lend him well. It's just a matter of how much of a needle he'll move in the NHL one day. But he's been playing really, really well. Oh boy. Okay. So I saw this. I try not to go on Twitter as much because it's a disaster zone, but I saw a lot of yelling and screaming about Will Smith and Gabe Perreault yesterday. And a lot of people in Sharks land, maybe being annoyed, and a lot of people outside Sharks land, especially in Ranger world, taking victory laps about Gabe Perreault, who has played very well at this World Junior, you have to admit. But what is my take on Will Smith? I rarely get to watch him as a Sharks fan, but I left feeling like Gavin Brindley looked better than Smith, and he was drafted 30 picks after. So I'm glad you threw in that last part, because I had Gavin Brindley in my top 10, and I think Will Smith was 5 on my board, or 6.
I think he was 6 on your board, and I had Brindley, I think, at 7 or 8.
Yeah, so Gavin. To both of us, they were very close. Gavin Brindley is on Team Scouching. If I were drafting where the Leafs picked, I'd be having him over Easton Cowan, which I still feel pretty good about.
And he's on Team AJ's Kraken, which I do the same thing as Will, but only I use Seattle because I started doing it when Seattle entered into the draft.
It is true. That is true. That is facts. So Will Smith, I think, is just a different player to a guy like Gavin Brindley. Gavin Brindley is a faster, I would say, and more intense 200-foot guy. Will Smith is more of a, there are things that Will Smith does that are, I think, just elite. Like the vision and the creativity that he has. The whole thing with him was you just have to get his motor going a little more, especially without the puck.
Exactly.
That's it. Just get the motor going a little more. The focus really seems to be get the puck to Will, let Will do his thing, and he'll set you up for a goal. And that's fine. Is he a bad draft pick? I think that, look, it's been 6 months. I think that's a ridiculous take. That people are hand-wringing about all of this stuff so quickly. Will Smith has not had a bad season with Boston College whatsoever. He's almost at 1.5 a game. Yes, Gabe Perreault is technically on paper scoring more, and I really like Gabe Perreault, but I mean, it's 2 points. And I don't know. I think Gabe Perreault has shown that he is capable of being also a very good offensive creator, like Will Smith. But really, I think that at the end of the day, I still think Will Smith's creativity and the way he sees the ice and the way he makes plays is really high end, really special. And Cutter and I think Gabe Perreault is also a very smart puck distributor. And I think in a lot of ways he is similar to a guy like Will Smith. But I just don't think it's as much of a unique trait as it is with Will Smith. I still feel like Gabe Perreault is maybe going to need to have a little bit more of a limited role in the NHL as more of an offensive leaning guy. And at the end of the day, maybe that's what Will Smith is too, right? A guy that maybe leans a little bit more offensively on purpose, and you put him at the wing, and they both end up being guys that score a ton of points in the NHL. Maybe one scores 90 a year, maybe one scores 80 a year. That's a big bar, but in this day and age, who knows? But at the end of the day, I don't know. It's you're going to get guys that can score points. I think with Will Smith, though, there is just something there that is special. And if you just can get him to rise to the occasion when things get tough a little bit more with regards to his pace and the motor, then boy, I think you're going to have a heck of a hockey player there. I mean, just the cleverness and the creativity are just super, super good. So look, I don't know. It's an argument that I just don't really care for, especially in the context of the World Juniors, because it's the World Junior Hockey Championship. The states are outmatching pretty much everybody they've played so far. And I mean, the weaknesses are there with these players, but boy, I mean, you can't take a whole lot from the World Juniors. Lots of storylines come and go all the time. And having watched a bit of Boston College, I see no reason to be concerned about Will Smith. And I also see reason to be kind of excited about Gabe Perreault. I had him a little bit later on my board than a lot of people, and I still feel like a mid first round to 15 to 22 range makes some level of sense based on his weaknesses. But yeah, I mean, he's been playing really, really well. So I just want to see what happens. I couldn't care less about who is better than whom now. I just think there's a bit of more specialness to Will Smith. And at the end of the day, they're both probably looking like they're going to be really good players. Kai Howard asked about Elias Pettersson. We kind of already went over him. The plan is to bring him to Abbotsford at the end of the year. I think that's where he belongs. I think just learning the North American game. I don't think his game will have trouble translating as it is if what he plays at the World Juniors is how he plays in general. He should be a good defense first guy, and you just give him some time to learn the ropes at that level. And yeah, maybe you end up with something out of him. I feel like he's a good defensive player and with some good feet under him, and he makes things happen, which is nice.
And what, he was like a 3rd round pick, if I'm not mistaken, or
late second? No, he wasn't a first rounder.
But if you end up with a guy who you plug in on your 3rd pair, who cares? That's perfectly acceptable and not a bad goal to have for a guy like that.
Yeah, like I don't think he's going to score a ton of points. I don't think he's that type of player. And I don't know if he's going to be like spectacular, but solid guy. Yeah, he was a 3rd round pick, 80th overall. Yeah, you take that. Good. You take it. Some 80th overall picks don't even get to the AHL, let alone when they're 19. Oh boy. Very open-ended question. What prospects have changed your look on them, if any? If so, what was the most positive and negative thing you've had on a prospect? I mean, it happens a lot. Danila Yurov is having a really good year. I think he's just continued to just get better and better. Overall, as an all-around player without anything super special about him, which I'm always a little bit cooler on. Gabe Perreault, I think, I moved him up my board quite a bit at the end of last year, but I don't think I did quite enough. And I feel like where the Rangers picked him kind of makes a lot of sense. And I think he's had a really, really good season for sure. But again, my analysis on him last year was he's going to score points at the junior level. He's going to score points pretty much everywhere, I think, until the NHL. And the NHL is going to be the ultimate test. So we'll see what happens. But he's been having a good year. I mean, I don't know. It's not something I think about a tremendous amount. And again, there's not a whole lot of guys where I've really changed my mind. And a lot of situations where if I hold strong, I turn out to be feeling a little better than I thought I would be. Guys like Dalibor Dvorsky being in this tournament. Like, yes, had some good moments, whatever. But I still saw some serious problems and weaknesses there that got him exposed here and there. But good player, good against junior competition. But again, the ultimate test will be professional. And I think there are still questions. I'm just going through guys who are at the World Juniors this year who I have been really, really impressed by that I never really thought were particularly good. Which I hate saying, or guys that I saw as super high upside. Yanni Newman, I think, has come a really long way from where I saw him when he was younger. Maverick Lamoureux, I think, also has improved quite a bit over the last couple of years. I didn't have him ranked, but again, a 1st round pick to me felt crazy and still feels crazy, but he was solid. I don't know. It's hard to say also because like before kids turn 20, there's not much you can really glean. They haven't really sorted everything out yet.
They're not in the final version of themselves.
Right.
Even physically, like they'll grow, they'll gain weight, all these different things.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Based on the World Junior this year, there's been a couple, I would say, a little bit in either direction. Again, look at Philip Machar. I think a guy asked about Philip Machar in this tournament. I think I look at Philip Machar, and some people were writing him off last year. And I think that was very, very hasty. I think he showed why he was highly regarded as a 1st round pick last year or 2 years ago. After a bit of a quiet year last year, he has been a big driver for that Kitchener Rangers team for sure. Him and Carson Raykop, I think, have driven a lot of that bus. And on Slovakia this year, I thought he played extremely well. tournaments without Russia don't hit the same. That's very true. The Russian team this year too would have been so good. Just so loaded with guys. And I mean, I like Timur Mukhanov a lot, and I like Gleb Trikazov a lot, and I feel like those guys could use a bit of a platform. And I feel like at this tournament, both of those guys, Mukhanov has been in the KHL all year, pretty much. Gleb Trikazov has been in the VHL most of the year and playing better than he was last year. So I feel like those two guys against junior competition would have a fun time. And I think a lot of Russians would really give a lot of these teams a run for their money this year. Their goaltending would have been outstanding. Sergei Murashov, Sergei Ivanov, Evgeny Volokhin. There's a lot of really good options for them in net.
Yeah, I would have loved to have seen Simashev play.
Simashev, yeah. Yep, Daniel Boot in this tournament. I feel like Daniel Boot would have had a fantastic tournament. So yeah, it doesn't hit the same. I wish Russia were in the tournament, but I totally understand why they're not. So yes, hopefully they're not gone too much longer, whatever that would mean for the country of Russia. But yes, no, it's true. The tournament does not really hit quite the same this year without Russia. Oh, okay. So yeah, then there's a lot of yelling and screaming about Will Smith. Look, Twitter is Twitter. Twitter's job, people's job on Twitter who are social media oriented, their job is to get people arguing and say things that are, I would say, true-ish if you take a cross section of the situation you're in, right? If you look at the Americans and do a cross section right now and say, well, this person is scoring more, they have this highlight, therefore X. I don't know. Look, I think it's just, I know it's the job, and I'm a person who has social media accounts, and the better I am at it, the more money I make generally. But I just can't really get too wrapped up in all these arguments about who is better than whom, and this player drafted 6 months ago was a bad draft pick because of this thing that happens at a tournament where half the teams are not good and your team is a powerhouse, and therefore all of this stuff is true. I don't know. I'm a guy who watches a crap load of hockey, like a lot. And I mean, look, some of the things that other talent evaluators, I think, put out there as say, whoa, that was so amazing. That was this and this and this. Like I saw something about the goal that Thomas Galvis scored, or that he set up, where he cut in from the blue line and everything. And like, again, I am a Thomas Galvis fan. I think he's a really good player. I think the word's out on him. I had him in the late first, early second going into the tournament. I get the feeling the word is out, and I like him. That play was really nice. That primary assist right at the goal mouth, really, really nice. But I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, he came very close to turning that puck over 2 or 3 times with the various moves he was trying to pull at the offensive blue line. Like if that bounce goes a different way, nobody even notices. And yes, it was a very nice play at the goal mouth, but there's, it's like you can see the highlight, but there is so much more that happens that you also have to factor in, that kind of factors into this. So, points are points. They're good. They're rewards for good play generally. Say what you will about those Czech goals against Canada, but they count. It's just, to me, this kind of talk where this player automatically is a better draft pick because of what is happening in this tournament. I don't know. I think it's meant to drive attention and drive discussion because people are very sensitive about their team's performance, especially on the internet, which I understand, right? I get it. This stuff happens with me and other talent evaluators. I see what other people say about players and I'm going, whoa, like, is that right? And then I go and check it out for myself and I kind of form my own opinion and I go, yeah, but like, what if I'm wrong? And like, what if I, blah, 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 whatever, and at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. If you're a San Jose Sharks fan, Will Smith is yours and he's going to be a solid player. If you're a Rangers fan, Gabe Perreault is yours and he's going to be hopefully a solid player. Ryan Leonard, I think Ryan Leonard is going to be a solid NHL player at what he does. But in my view, I do not see that next level thinking or creativity or playmaking or whatever that a guy like Will Smith has. The motor that Will Smith kind of lacks, Ryan Leonard has, and that physical play. But I don't know. What do you like more, right? Like if Ryan Leonard is a 30-point, 40-point NHL player who is a really, really, really good 200-foot, physical guy, and Will Smith is out there scoring 80 points, but maybe not the best 5-on-5 defender, who do you value more? Who's better? And that's, again, why I hate that word better. I just don't.
You could be like me and love speed and have Oliver Moore at 5 because that's the kind of team I want. Guys who go fast and play super intense and will just run you out of the building.
Right.
It's all about what you value. At some level, a lot of these guys are very similar in terms of their talent levels. It's just the types of players that you like and what you're looking for is different. There's a reason I love Fabian Lysell so much. It's because he's that kind of player. There's a reason I love Gavin Brindley so much because he's that kind of player, right? Those are the guys I look at and value, I think, a lot more highly than the rest of people. But that's because I was obsessed with the way the Colorado Avalanche and Carolina Hurricanes played. Where I'm like, yeah, why aren't teams just trying to basically use their speed to chase teams out of games?
Or the United States in this tournament.
Exactly. Like, look at how good they are, right? That's kind of the way that they're built. Not everybody on that team is super fast, as you mentioned with Will Smith. But, like, there are a lot of guys who are rambunctious little, what's a good word that's not a swear word? I want to say bastards, even though that's kind of a swear word. But,
you made your point. I get it. Yeah. Like, bastards is fair.
Yeah. Like, that's what they are.
Yeah.
A lot of them.
And I think, like that. And again, the common retort to that kind of talk is, well, look at what Vegas does in the playoffs. Look at these teams. Look at these teams. But like, yes, the thing about Vegas though, is they are also fast. Mm-hmm. Like the Vegas Golden Knights are not slow. They play with the puck really well.
And they're intense.
They have guys, they've got guys like Jonathan Marchessault and Jack Eichel and like Shea Theodore and all these guys who are not the big, heavy physical players. The issue is how you think about what you're looking for with physical players and what you're expecting out of them, right? Like look at a guy like Fraser Minton, right? Fraser Minton is big. He's a smart puck mover. Is he a super aggressive, high pace physical player all over the ice? Like a guy like, say, an Alex Tuck? No, that's not what he is. So is he valuable in a game where in like the NHL where you can be sort of a bigger physical guy, but you also need to have pace in your game. You need to have some pace and some speed. And, it can't just be give me the puck, I make a skill move and pass it to the next guy all the time. Like you need that, but it can't be that all the time. So again, it's like about what you're looking for and how you value it. And again, like a lot of the situations where I disagree with people, it's because I either don't really recognize what it is they value and what kind of a hockey team they would be trying to build by ordering these players in such a way, or I just think that what they're valuing doesn't quite line up with what the NHL kind of requires. And that's really the focus, like finding the things that the NHL requires and hammering that stuff. Like looking at what happens in the NHL and what works and hammering it in the draft as much as you possibly can.
And right. And changed a lot, right? Like that's the other thing.
A lot.
I think a lot
just the last 3 years.
Yeah. I think a lot of people still value a lot of things that worked a while ago, right? And today the game is faster and there's a lot more skilled players in the league that are pulling off crazy things. Like there were no Michigan goals when I was growing up. There was none of that stuff. But it's awesome. Right. It's like this is the direction the league's going in. And I think a lot of the times, and I'm not trying to discredit other people's work, it's just I think there's people that value some of the more old school types of players that are more physical, that go to the net, that don't necessarily drive the play in the way that modern NHL players do today. So that's kind of the way I look at it. It's just I want guys who go fast. I want guys who try to contest every zone entry like their life depends on it.
Right.
I don't ever want to be playing in the defensive zone. And if we are, it's like they are. It's like you're holding out for a last stand. You're defending the fort, going at it with all your energy, kind of thing.
Yeah. And going back to that Will Smith debate, it's like to me that's like the only thing that guy does not really have. And it's a problem for sure. It could be an issue in the NHL, but like if you can get that point across and like develop that into him a little bit, then you're all set. You're
and surround
golden.
him with guys that do that.
Yes, exactly. Gavin Brindley.
Yes, Anthony Duclair, who the Sharks have, but
might go to
Anthony
Boston
Duclair
now. Yep.
Because that's apparently a rumor. But
okay.
Like
his what 18th team?
Maybe.
Okay, we had a question. How would a Boston Sabres fan be optimistic about their prospects' performances, given how many great World Junior performers have graduated in the past and have had the playoff drought persist? Okay. What are the skills that separate this level and create exceptional players at the next level? So
I think we just kind of talked about that.
Yeah, we kind of did. I don't think that, I don't know if that question is sort of framing Buffalo Sabres fans as pessimistic.
I can understand why they would be, especially with the long drought, but like, look at their players in this tournament.
Yeah, like
Yuri Kulik rocks. And I would have said effing rocks if this wasn't live.
Well, he just effing,
good.
Effing.
Yeah.
There you go.
But he's awesome. I like Matt Savoy quite a lot. We see what Zach Benson's doing right now. There's other guys that are going to come to mind too in a second. They're just not. I'm just not getting.
They've got Anton Wahlberg as well. They've got Noah Ostlund.
Yes, that's the one.
They've got awesome. Who else is on this list that I like? I mean, I don't know. The guy I mentioned earlier, Nikita Novikov, I think has played quite well.
Mm-hmm. But they got a lot of guys that are.
They got a lot of good players,
right?
And I think, do they have a bunch of picks again? I can't remember.
It's very possible, considering
they have.
The team.
No, they have 5. They have 6 picks this year. So no, they're not. They're kind of not going to go that direction. But in any case, I don't know. Buffalo Sabres fans, it's not really like they're not winning the Stanley Cup right now, but they've got good players on the way, and you just got to be patient, and I think you'll be rewarded.
I do think they need some more defensive guys, like guys who are going to be able to shut down other teams' offenses. Like they're kind of lacking in that regard, and they do have a ton of forward prospects, and not that they don't have a lot of defensive prospects. It's just that pool is definitely not as deep. So that might be something that they're trying to target or should be trying to target. And not that you'll go out of your way to draft a defenseman because he's there over the actual best player available. But like Buffalo, really, how far away are they from being a really good team? Maybe 2
not
years?
Far. Yeah, I don't think it's that far.
And always I'm surprised by teams, right? Like I always kind of go into the season with a very status quo ranking of, okay, where do I think where these teams are going to finish? And like last year, I didn't have New Jersey making the playoffs. I had them inching up and getting better, but like they really broke out last year. Now, granted, they're not as good this year, but still, like I think they're a really good team, and you'll see with teams that they'll take steps forward, they'll take steps back. I think in Buffalo's case, it's been a long time, but it's actually looking like they're going to come out of this dark period relatively
Here's something I will mention though. Over the not the off season, but this was like a month and a half ago, so this might be a little out of date. But I started going through a bunch of teams that have been sort of rebuilding, I guess, over the last few years, or teams that had a lot of draft picks since I started doing this work. And Buffalo is one of those teams. And I did I guess you could say a team scouching for all of these teams, and just went with the best player available on my board. And of all the teams, the highest average score relative to what the team actually has now is the Buffalo Sabres, which is very interesting. I don't have the list of players in front of me of who that would have been, but the Buffalo Sabres, on average, that NHL score metric I have is 33% higher on average than what they're doing right now. I think when you look at the Buffalo Sabres and the prospect pool they have, I think there's a lot of guys where I'm like, they took a swing on guys who score, but again, like what we were talking about earlier, where if you look at them play, you see issues, and I'm sort of going, okay, I don't think I would have picked that guy who scores a lot of points. Olivier Nadeau, Who else is on here? Gavin McCarthy, Victor Nuchev, Alexander Kisakov. Who else? Maxim Sturbach. I didn't think was gonna really move the needle a ton. And those are the guys that I think there's a bit of a weak point, but they're not your first, second round picks usually, right? Like, and that's where you get real problems is when you're messing up your first picks, your first 2, 3, 4 picks in the draft when you're a team that's kind of rebuilding. But I mean, I don't know. In general, I think Buffalo's doing just fine. And I forgot you mentioned this. Like their defense group is also very young and very skilled offensively, right? Owen Power and Rasmus Dahlin.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys. And so, yeah, they need some stability on the back end. But I've liked what I've seen out of Nikita Novikov, who's a good defensive player. And yeah, I mean, we'll just have to see what happens with them. Vsevolod Komarov is another one who's having a really good year with Drummondville in the QMJHL. So we'll see what happens with him. But I don't know. I think signs are very, very bright for Buffalo.
And the other thing is you can always trade for guys like that or sign them. Because you're not going to get all of your team through drafting. It's just pretty much impossible to do so. And you're also just neglecting a whole other part of, acquiring talent if you're not signing guys. And so there's going to be free agents available or trade opportunities available for them to go out and get better. And whether that's moving along some of these offensive leaning prospects that they've got, that's fine. Because just as long as you get good assets that you have, you don't always have to use them in your own system. You can always trade them and find guys who you actually need.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they can do that. And I know there's been talk of Kevin Adams not being a great GM at sometimes, but I don't think he's done anything particularly wrong.
Yeah, like what are you picking apart with him? Like I don't understand.
He's had a really rough situation that he inherited, and then Jack Eichel left, and there's been a lot of turmoil around the team. But what they were able to get for Jack Eichel, it's pretty amazing that it's worked out as well as it has for both teams.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think Buffalo's going to be fine. I had to scroll down a bit for the next question that was, not something we've covered already. But who are some players you can see on the Canadian team next year? Gavin McKenna, ? This is something I've thought about a little bit, but probably not enough. Just for a note, Canada has, I believe, 5 players eligible to return, skaters at least. Macklin Celebrini, Easton Cowan, Matthew Wood, Oliver Blanc, and Carson Rakoff. I think it's a fair bet that 4 of those guys will be back. I doubt Macklin Celebrini will be there. But Easton Cowan, Matthew Wood, Oliver Blanc, and Carson Rakoff as a core for next year. We'll see. I'll have to think about it a little bit more because I don't know. Again, let me just pull up my rankings from last year. I'll go through this relatively quickly because AJ needs to have the dinner that I passed to him through a hole in the wall.
Yeah, I need my undefrosted fish stick.
Yes.
Just a singular fish stick.
So, yeah. So let's see. In Canada, what do we got for next year? Yeah, Nate Danielson can't come. Benson, I would assume, will not be there. Who else have we got here? Colby Barlow, I would think, would be there. Tanner Molendyke, I would think, would be there. I think he's an 05. He is. Mm-hmm. Callum Ritchie, I would imagine, will be there.
Yeah, he's decent.
I don't know how you don't take Bradley Nadeau next year. I think that would be bizarre. Ethan Gauthier, Andrew Crystal.
Yeah, I'd like to see Andrew Crystal at the tournament.
Etienne Morin could be there. Wait, Crystal's eligible. Gauthier's eligible. Who else? Bo Akey could be there. Lucas Dragicevic maybe as an outside chance because I don't know what Hockey Canada thinks of a guy like him. I mean, Riley Height. Like they're gonna have a good team again, but I don't see like a world-ending roster there, right? Like if your first line-ish, something along the lines of Cowan or Rakoff with Colby Barlow and I don't know, Bradley
I think your
Nadeau.
face says it all.
Yeah, like it's fine. It'll be a good team, but it's not. Again, I just don't think it's going to be like, oh, right, it's Hockey Canada's back again, right? Like, yeah, we won the gold medal the last 2 years, but don't forget, Slovakia almost eliminated Canada last year in the quarterfinals. Like that, they won in overtime, or Slovakia lost in overtime. Mason McTavish saved a gold medal winning goal on the goal line. Like these things, these tournaments can come down to like very small things. And sometimes it just doesn't go your way. And if your team is not overwhelmingly talented, which, I mean, Canada will be good, it's going to be interesting to see what they look like next year, because I think other teams are going to be looking pretty good. I would think that guys like Ryan Leonard and Will Smith and
Gabe Pro
who else?
again, Oliver Moore.
Oliver Moore. Let me Brindley won't be there.
Zeev Buium can come back.
Zeev Buium will probably be there. You bring in Brady Cleveland to make smash.
Yes.
They'll have a good team. William Whitelaw, I think, is eligible. I think, yeah. Anyway, yeah. So I don't know. Like Canada will have a fine team for 2025 eligibles. I don't know what. They usually don't bring those. Let me just double check real quick. 2025. Yeah, I mean, like, are they Porter Martone? I think could be on the team. Michael Misa probably gets a look. Malcolm Spence probably gets a look, and those guys are talented. Cole Reshny, maybe, but I don't know. Roger McQueen, like they might have a handful of guys that crack the roster for next year's draft, but I don't know. It might be tricky. And other teams like Sweden will have a couple of draft eligibles probably next year in Frondell and Ekberg and maybe Eklund. I don't know. But anyway, we're getting carried away. We're getting carried away with projections, and all things kinds of change all the time. And maybe Gavin McKenna's there. It'd be fun. Maybe. Jordan Gavin, maybe. I don't know. Is there any literature on scouting or analytics that you would recommend for someone getting more into it? It's a little out of date, but I would say Rob Volman's Stat Shot is a good start. I'm looking at my bookshelf as if it's there, but it isn't. I would also say that the MVP Machine, which is a book I read this summer, it's about baseball, so it's not hockey related, but it's about development in baseball and like talent development, and some case studies of guys who go against the grain a lot and guys who were written off by a bunch of teams and ended up working out just fine, and how data science and how even just like kind of I kind of was reading through it, and a lot of it I was kind of nodding my head going like, okay, I already do this. It's a lot of like, you look at the data and you go, what does this player do well? Like, this sounds super simple, right? But a lot of the book, or not a lot, but a large portion of the book, for example, was about pitchers. And it was about how MLB teams are obsessed with pitchers who have 4 or 5 pitches, right? Especially starters. They want guys who can pitch a bunch of different pitches, hit all different kinds of the plate, inside, outside, baseball, whatever you want to call it. So when you have guys who have 2 great pitches and 5 or 3 not so great pitches that they're getting cranked on, teams see that as a disadvantage and go, okay, well, this guy isn't going to work. So they either put them in the bullpen or waive them or whatever. But this book kind of talks about these baseball schools or analysis departments where they go, who cares how many pitches you pitch? Like, if you throw a curveball 40% of the time and your whiff rate is really high, people can't hit your curveball. So throw your curveball, throw your fastball. Like, we'll teach you how to throw something different and focus on that if you want. But like a 3-pitch starting pitcher, like, it's a little more difficult, but like we could find some value in that and give it a go. Or, when a guy's throwing their fastball over this area of the plate, it's working out way better. So let's work on their control to do that a little better. So a lot of the book was sort of about that. So it's not necessarily scouting. It was just about sort of talent evaluation in general and sort of the psychological side too. And it's a big reason why when I talk about hockey players, I refrain from saying this guy's better than this guy, or this guy's worse than this guy, or this guy's just bad or whatever, because it's like, there's a psychological side to this too, right? Like, young people, being a young person, and well, not young anymore ish, but when I was young, positive affirmation and encouragement and belief from people above you and older than you, is remarkably important, right? And if you have a 50-year-old baseball executive who spent a bunch of money on you going, yeah, I think we're done here. I don't think we have anything we can do with you anymore. Like, and then you go somewhere else, like, and they give you a pat on the back and go, well, let's just tweak a few things and go from there. Yeah, I think that's a better way to go. And that's kind of what that's about. So those are the two that I'd recommend. The other books, Stat Shots right there. That's fun. I mean, the other books I've read recently aren't really hockey or sports related, but they're more about like imposter syndrome and like business management, like small business management. But like that's really it. What's the problem with Canadian goaltending development? Look around you in Canada, right? Like there's a billion different goalie schools. There's a bunch of people who probably don't really know what they're talking about, who parents are just desperate to get their kid a leg up somehow and will pay a bunch of money to go to a goaltending school. Like it's a lot more centralized in the US. It's a lot more centralized in like Scandinavia. Russia, I have no idea what Russia's doing with their goaltenders. They may very well be standing 6 feet in front of them and whipping anvils at them to try to get them to stop pucks better and just be quicker. But Russian goaltenders are bonkers good in some cases. Just the quickness, the technical refinement that they have, from what I've been able to gather, is really, really, really good. So there's a lot of that.
I think a lot of it too with Russian goaltenders is that I don't remember where I heard this, so I could be making this up, but we're just going to say for the sake of my argument that I'm not, because that's a good way to start anything. A lot of those guys, like, they are taught how to anticipate play properly. So they'll go out and play and then play goalie. So you see a guy like Igor Shesterkin on the Rangers, and he's just a phenomenal goalie at actually at passing the puck. He can actually make plays and read it well. So I think for those guys, they're really good at reading and anticipating where the puck's going, who's going where and when. And because of that, they're able to react much better than a lot of other goaltenders. Where I think in Canada, if you're a goalie, you're just focused on stop puck.
Yep.
There, you're focused on where is it going, right? And they play out like they don't play goalie the entire time. Like they get them to actually go out and play forward and defense, I think, and they actually learn how to play the game as a skater, which then helps them translate into better goaltenders.
Yeah, I think so too. And yeah, it's I think again, the fractured hyper capitalist world that hockey in Canada is now, I think is harmful. Like it's like, yes, Hockey Canada has guides that they give to coaches to sort of help, and there's certifications you have to get to coach in Canada, but something ain't right, right? Like it's hard to deny that there's something going on here, that other countries are catching up. At least they're at least catching up, and maybe it's just that Canada is peaked already and other teams are just getting to that level. But I don't know. I don't really know. But goaltending, you cannot deny. Every single year recently, it's been a bit of a mixed bag for Canadians in net at the World Juniors and at the under 18 level. And it can really mess up their tournament at times. And other countries don't usually have that issue, right? You know, they've got guys coming along that can stop pucks and reliably. And if they face 40 shots in a night, they save 37 of them, right? Like they save 38 of them. You know, is that possible in Canadians? Sure. But it's more common outside of Canada, which is something to think about. What's up with Gleb Trikazov? He honestly, I watched a few games of him this year, and I watched a game of him in the KHL. I just don't think he's really diversified his game that much. I was really hoping to see a little bit more of than a north-south guy, a rush-focused guy who, you know, took his chances on the rush almost all the time. You know, I still think there's a great player there. I still think that there's something there. You know, you go to the Russian junior level, he's still quite young. I think you go to the Russian junior level, he's been very, very good for his age group. But the KHL, I thought the time I watched him in the KHL exposed, I think, a lot about him, where the foot speed is good, but more of part of the crowd at the KHL level. And they're just, the skill level is there, but he's not using it super well. And the defensive game, I think, also kind of comes and goes, and that'll really expose you in the KHL. But I still believe in Trikazov. Looking back, the team Scouching pick that year when I had the opportunity to take Trikazov was Lane Hudson. I feel pretty good about that decision that I made on the fly, and I was hopeful that Trikazov would be available to the next pick they had that I had, but unfortunately I just barely missed out on him because Carolina did what they do. But I ain't shook. What are the Montreal's missing? What's Montreal missing in their prospect pool to reach the next level? I mean, like, fun factor? I don't know. Like, they have Cole Caulfield. I think Montreal drafts a lot of solid hockey players. David Reinbacher should be a solid defenseman for them. They've got Lane Hudson, who I think could be an interesting defenseman for them, high-end offense. But they don't really have a game changer, right? Like, there's a lot of chatter about how good Yuri Slafkovsky has been lately. He has been good. Like, he's been a good hockey player. Habs fans, that YouTube short we put out has gone a little turbo. And I still get comments from Habs fans saying, like, in the last 5 games, he's been really good. And it's like, okay, yes. But if you watch that video, that's not what we were talking about. We were talking about how he was better. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But I don't really see him as I can take over the game type player, right? A lot of people are accurately pointing out, without him forechecking or without him freeing up a loose puck along the boards, goals at the other end don't happen. It's like, great. That's an expectation of a hockey player, especially one that you draft in the first round. Like, that stuff.
And first overall.
Yes, if you don't see that in a player, that's problematic. Again, we went back to, you got to have guys who off the puck give a crap and have that motor and work. So he has that. Good. Like, that's good, right? It's just I feel like the Montreal Canadiens need a central X factor player, which I just don't think they have just yet. They have a lot of good players. There's a lot of potential. I just don't know if I see like that X factor core group or player, which is really hard to take. And I don't think there is one this year, but I think there's a lot of very good players that you could add.
They're really missing a number one center more than anything. Like,
that's kind of what I'm getting at.
And I'm not discrediting how good of a player Nick Suzuki is, because he's a really good player.
I love Nick Suzuki.
But is he a 1C? Like, a true number one center, you're confident that guy can win you a Stanley Cup if he is the guy in the middle of the ice? No.
Yeah. Him or Connor McDavid, right? Like, say what you will about the rest of the Edmonton Oilers, but some teams just have guys that are X factors, and I just don't know if they have that yet. I mean, maybe that's Cole Caulfield, maybe.
But you need more than just one.
Exactly.
You do.
Yeah. What do we got here? How do you feel about Philip Meshar's tournament? Very good. I think he's been great for Slovakia for sure to this point. Or, well, was great because the team got eliminated, unfortunately. Big sad. Thoughts on how Sandy Pelika has played? He was also very, very good. Great OT winner there, but a great player, I think. I think he's been pretty darn good. Do you think Dionisio will play in the NHL? I don't. I mean, you don't want to say no, but I just think that there are holes in his game that you also saw in this tournament. He played a lot of minutes, and I think he was probably their best offensive player, and Switzerland clearly knew that, and they ran the play through him all the time, and they gave him the green light to do basically whatever he wants in the offensive zone. So I feel like, again, projecting to the NHL, going to be tricky. Can't say it's impossible, but you never know. Also, great username, Shaquille Oatmeal. I love it. Does Ryan Suzuki have a lengthy NHL future? I want to say yes, but I don't think so at this point. I just don't know. Again, it's about that motor, and it's about the smarts to play as a unit. It is very difficult. He's in the last year of eligibility for my system as a prospect. He's coming out next year, and he is a half a point per game player in the AHL. He is below average as a prospect on paper. And I just feel like there were, unfortunately, as I loved Ryan Suzuki in his draft year. I thought the potential was huge, but it's this high skill, high skill game that just was, I felt a little bit, in retrospect, a little bit, I need the puck on my stick and I need to do what I do, right? It wasn't distributive. It wasn't very, he wasn't really making everybody around him a whole lot better, but the talent was there, right? So it was, where he was drafted, I thought was a fine thing to do. Who knows what else is going on there, but I don't know. I feel like maybe he's a guy that if he ends up on waivers next year, which I think he will, that someone maybe claims, and maybe Twitter gets a little bit like, oh, we got Ryan Suzuki, and then he goes right to the AHL and waived again and does okay there, supposedly. I don't know. I feel like he might be a guy that in Europe on bigger ice might have a lot of success, but he's having a tough go, I think, and it's a bit tricky. Is Cole Hudson being so high in mock drafts a hype because of his brother, or is he legit? I don't really think Cole Hudson is that good. I think he's more of a second or third round guy. The creativity's there. I just feel like he's just he's Lane Hudson, but not quite there. The creativity and the confidence is there, but it doesn't really work as much. And some of the defensive stuff I've seen of him was just not great. And I don't know. I'll keep looking at him over the course of the year. But he's lower on my board than I think a lot of people would expect. And yes, I agree. We've been stolen a super duper Slovakian team for sure. Slovak team or whatever. Timur Mukanov, floor and ceiling. Well, I'd say his floor is about what he is now, like a middle six KHL guy who plays hard and drives a lot of the good results, but maybe doesn't put the puck in the net a tremendous amount. His ceiling, man, I don't know. I think he could be a really good 200-foot NHL player. He's got skill. He's got a shot. He has that motor. Maybe middle six guy, which I think is decent. So yeah, I think he's a good player. Still, obviously. And he's been very good in the KHL this year. I think he's among the best first-time re-entry players in the KHL, except for Matvei Michkov. I think he's right at the top, but I could be wrong. Thoughts on Nazar this tourney? Yeah, he's been really good. Nazar's been really, 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 really good. And I know some people kind of lost it a little bit with him last year when he was hurt and wasn't scoring a ton, but yeah, he's been great. Any junior A players to watch out for? No, I don't think so. Maybe I kind of dig Diego Johnson here and there with Sherwood Park, but I don't know. I don't think there are any. There's a couple of junior A guys that I think could be really good college players. Like Trevor Hoskin was really good at the junior A championship, and he's going to college and he's going to get a lot of minutes. I think he's going to Canisius College, and who knows. Yes. So just for future reference, AJ, we were told that the word we're looking for is rambunctious little scamps. So that's good. I could take that first for those kinds of players. Bradley Nadeau thoughts. Can he and Josh be a legitimate pair at the NHL level? I don't know so much about Josh, but Bradley rules. Bradley is great. I liked him a lot last year. I felt like similar to like a guy like Will Smith, the motor at both ends was kind of the only question mark. I just didn't see a whole lot of it last year, but boy, when the puck hit his stick, he could fly, he could make a play, he could shoot. I think it would be a little hasty to pull him out of college right away and put him in the NHL and whatever. I think him and Josh will be great NCAA players. I think they'll rejuvenate that main program. I think they already are. And if they can attract some good recruits for next year, maybe, and make a good run, I think that would be an interesting experience for him. I really like Bradley Nadeau. He was drafted a little higher than I would have taken him, but not that much higher. It was a little bit of a take for me, but and I also just had some guys ranked higher that I still like a little more. But for a guy who can fly and a guy who can score, he's right there. Last question of the day, and then I'll let everybody go. We're running a little over time, but that's okay. Danil Yurov, is Danil Yurov going to step in the NHL in 2 years? There are reports of him signing in the KHL rather than playing in the AHL next year. I don't know. I think he could be good enough to step in and see how he does. I don't think he would be a net negative in 2 years, considering he's just gotten better overall. Just a really smart hockey player, reads play really well, gets to scoring areas really well. I think he plays a projectable North American style of play, if he stays in the KHL, like I know there's reporting out there and stuff that like Russia is sort of underhandedly telling KHL teams and players and their agents that like they want them to stay in Russia for 5 years before leaving or something along those lines. And that kind of lines up with this with Yurov, where after about 5 years in Russia, he'll come over. Do I really like the idea of taking Russian players out of the KHL and putting them in the AHL anyway? Not really. Like, I feel like the expectation for them is like, look, like, why would I want to go play in Bridgeport, unless I want to, but I don't blame them for going, why would I want to play in a place like,
in this case, Iowa?
Yeah. Why would I go to Iowa when I can stay at home in Magnitogorsk, make decent money, as long as they actually pay you the money, make decent money and play at a really high level in front of a lot of fans? If it's the NHL, great, put me in. I'll play. I love the NHL, but I just don't think it's like a high priority for a lot of players. Obviously there are exceptions, but I don't know. So whatever it may be, I still feel like since it's only ever happened 0 times that a player drafted from Russia never comes to the NHL that is highly regarded and just stays in the KHL forever, it's never happened. So I feel like that just isn't going to happen with Danil Yurov. Obviously circumstances are a little different, but I don't know. I just don't feel like that's going to be the case. Like, I don't think we're going back to like what the Soviet Union hockey in the 80s was like, where it's like you're smuggling guys out of hotels, because I just don't think that that's perfectly doable or feasible.
And yeah,
like,
they're used to a situation like that with Kaprizov, and look how great he turned out when he came over here. I'm not saying Yurov's going to be that, but it's like you can always wait and then get a really good player at a granted it's only for 1 year at a cheap deal, but like for a team like Minnesota that's in cap hell, that could be very valuable.
Looking at you, Ivan Demidov. Can't wait for him to go 17th overall or something and score 100 points in the NHL in 5 years. Anyway, that'll be it for today. Thank you so much for joining me. I know it was a little bit crazy getting this scheduled and everything. I appreciate AJ. I appreciate you being here and last minute, helping me out and everything. It's been a ride for the last 2 hours. And so the plan for now, tomorrow after the semifinals are done, we're going to do a recap stream just to the semifinals, something relatively casual and straightforward, just talking about the games. And the relegation game, I think, will also probably come up because I want to watch it. And then Friday, we're going to do watch-alongs. So we'll organize that. So Friday during the bronze and gold medal games, we'll be streaming live. I'm going to see if we can play around with the format a little bit, so that maybe it can be a little more watch-along friendly. I'll see if I can maybe get some special guest in the house to maybe watch the game with and talk some crap with, but we'll see. We'll see what I can do. We'll see what I can put together. And we'll see you then. So that will be tomorrow and Friday. Tomorrow's stream, we're aiming for around 6 p.m. So we'll confirm that tomorrow, depending on when the games finish and some other stuff. And then Friday, we'll get the festivities started as the World Junior Games get started, and we'll stay tuned for that. So thank you very much. Again, thank you to the sponsors of the show, Fanatics, with the QR code in the description. You also can go to Puck Preps and support me. And read the work over there with a subscription, or Scouching.ca if you would like to get some unique data insights into the NHL and the prospects and stuff in the draft. It's all good stuff. So check all that out. Thank you very much, and we will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow, it feels weird to say, but yes, it will be tomorrow. All right. Thank you very much. See ya.